because this is such a character-centric movie, I wanted to focus on the character of Napoleon Bonaparte right to start. So, as the main character, did you think that he was a compellingly flawed character in this movie?
So, flawed, yes. Compelling, debatable. That's what I'll say. Because he's definitely arrogant. He definitely has his own like flaws, but he's also very smart. He's also like a military genius in some regards. Like it showcases again and again the military battles he's in, and he's clearly knows what he's doing. But I mean, as a whole, like I mean, in a way, he's very well developed for most parts of his character. He's well developed. But as far as compelling, like I didn't see like have an emotional or compelling reason to root for Napoleon, if that makes sense, from the get-go.
Right.
Like he's kind of this character you're introduced to, and you're not really given a whole lot of like good reason to like, oh, he's the good guy, he's the hero you want to root for to succeed or whatever. It's not like the movie gives you a whole lot of foundation for that.
Sure, and that's an interesting point. I think because, and it's great that we're getting right on this right off the bat, because this movie, in some ways, and this is part of the problem, I'm sure we'll get into it more as the story progresses, but this movie is so character-centric that it is very focused on following his life throughout the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, the idea of a cohesive storyline around a clear goal or objective isn't very clear, because they try to balance all aspects of his life equally in the story. So when you're looking at, okay, is this a story about his conquering? Is this a story about his romantic life? Is this a story about him returning to take over France, right? And his political endeavors? In a sense, the answer is yes to all of those, because it's all aspects of his life, rather than focusing on a specific thing that he is trying to achieve and everything else being subplots like it would in a normal story. Everything is kind of the same, like weighted the same in this movie.
Yeah.
And so as a result, I think the goal of that is to show that he is the primary character in this story, right? And it's all about him. And so it's so character-centric that how he is developed as a person is important. Is he a compelling character? And I think that that's a good question to raise. How would you say in regards to, let's compare this maybe to a different movie, right? So clearly, if you've not watched this movie, there's a couple things going for it. If you saw my 30-second summary, it's got some epic battle scenes, very impressive. There are some things that are worth considering if you're going to watch this movie. Probably watch it before you continue on. As always, there are spoilers. We're gonna plow right ahead. This movie, let's compare it to, for example, in the time of the season, A Christmas Carol. So that's a movie about a terrible man who is despicable, hated in all these ways, and yet in some ways this movie still is considered a classic because it tugs at your heartstrings and shows a character who is compelling in his own way. So I guess my question is, how is the Christmas Carol Ebenezer Scrooge a compelling character versus this Napoleon? How is he not a compelling character?
Well, one thing you could say for sure about Ebenezer Scrooge, and this isn't like, if you're going to say the overarching story, his character does change. Like there are moments of change, things where the character is clearly learning, rethinking his position. And as a character, like you just see like human emotions more or less peeking through, like the hard, like cynical, like gruff exterior of Ebenezer Scrooge. So I mean, in that regard, I mean, he's a character who changes quite a bit. And Napoleon maybe changes a little bit, but I don't know if he changes a whole lot over the course of the story. And in different ways he changes, like maybe in regards to Josephine. But he's still kind of like, from beginning to end, he still kind of maintains like his like, I am the master of the battlefield kind of thing, where it's like he doesn't really change in that perspective. He doesn't change as far as like his perspective on certain things. He still kind of maintains that he's this rude person to other countries and diplomats and characters, kind of exerting his control and power over them. So yeah, I don't know. I think maybe that's the biggest thing that comes to mind. Is like he doesn't have a whole lot of change in this movie as a character.
Honestly, that's what I think of first when I'm watching the movie too. I think you're making a really good point. I mean, Napoleon is uh they almost paint him as initially this character who's very ambitious, almost to a fault, that everything else falls to the wayside in regards to his ability to pursue what he wants in life. And he's incredibly ambitious, incredibly brash, incredibly jealous, and that drives everything that he does, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
when you look at him at the beginning and you look at him at the end, he's a completely the same person,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what happens. And so,
Well, actually, I just thought of something that maybe explains why the character doesn't change so much. I feel like the filmmakers and storytellers, when they were making this movie, they were so focused on making Napoleon this like stoic, epic character. Like they're just focused on what he was, like who he is in the like consciousness of like people's minds, I guess.
mhm.
That they didn't focus on his human aspects perhaps as much. Like they downplayed those to a degree, perhaps. Like maybe it was all about like making him this like trying to hype up the epic part of it and like distancing him from everyone else.
Yeah, that he was dehumanized because he was so epic,
Mm-hmm.
way up here compared to
Yeah.
everyone that
Mm-hmm.
we actually know and understand.
Yeah. So like it kind of just created this like apathy like if the audience, so it's like almost like you don't care about his character as much because he's so far removed from everyone. Like
Hmm.
he's not someone
Interesting.
you want to root for per se because he's supposed to be this character you look up to for some reason. Though in the process of doing that, we're not really given a whole lot of reason to look up to him aside from his military prowess.